In our last segment, we used test first and test-driven development to create an implementation of one of our controllers. Since then, I've gone back and I've implemented the rest of our controllers, and all of them are correctly retrieving and returning results the way we want them to. But as we're doing cloud-native application development, one of the main considerations we need to understand is how do we diagnose problems and how do we ensure that our applications are functioning properly, especially when they're distributed across potentially thousands of containers, hundreds of virtual machines, multiple data centers, multiple languages and frameworks. And in order to facilitate that, what we really want is some sort of structured logging output. Most of the most common the most common log aggregating systems like EFK Stack or ELK Stack or Splunk work best with a structured log format, and generally it's JSON format because JSON makes it really easy for those applications which rely under the hood on Elasticsearch to index that data. So let's add JSON logging to our ASP.NETCore application. To do that, first we're going to install a library called Serilog for ASP.NETCore. Now we're going to wire Serilog into our application in the program.js file. So we'll go to program CS file. And we're going to paste our Serilog snippet. And let's walk through what all of this means. So we're telling our default builder to use Serilog, read its configuration from our hosting context configuration, enrich from our log context. And we won't really talk about it in this segment, but there are ways that you can add context to your logging statements for each request. And then finally, we're going to output to the standard output in a rendered compact JSON format. Once we've done that, we can then tell ASP.NETCore to use Serilog for request logging. So we say use Serilog request logging. I'm just going to paste that in. Perfect. With that done, what we've done is we've replaced the default Microsoft plain text output logging with Serilog. So anywhere we would do logging, we can now we will now get JSON output for those logs. So for example, if you recall in our controller, we're accepting an iLogger instance. We can use this logger instance down here in, say, get to do. Let's say if we try to retrieve a to-do that doesn't exist, we can say logger.log warning. We can pass in our exception, failed to find to do with ID to do ID. And then we can pass the to do ID as an argument. So now whenever we request a non-existent to do from the API, it should log in JSON format. Let's try that out and make sure it all works. So .NET run. Uh-oh. Oh. I implemented one of my methods incorrectly. There we go. .NET run. And you'll see already just on startup that our output logs have switched over to JSON format. And we mentioned earlier that we were using that compact log format, rendered compact JSON formatter. So that's why we see @t, which is short for timestamp, @m, which is short for message, @I, which is short for ID, or log, unique log ID. And then we have our enriched context. So all of these key value pairs make up our enriched context. So let's actually try this out and see if we can cause an error to be indicated. So I'm going to use my Swagger UI. I'm going to pass in a GUID that I know doesn't exist. I'm going to execute it. I'm going to get the expected 404 error not found. And we'll see that when we switch back over, that we have logs for that information. And if we go up a little bit, we should find our error as a warning log statement, which is here. And if we look at this carefully, we should find our full stack trace from that exception. There we go. That's our exception right here. Failed to find to do with ID blah. It's a level warning. There's the log level warning. It's a system argument exception, unable to find with ID. And here is our full stack trace. And it doesn't get separated into multiple lines. It just becomes part of the JSON blob of the log output, which is exactly what we would want. In the next segment, we'll talk about distributed tracing.